Okay, so my name is Bruce Penson. I'm the Managing Director of ProDrive. And today, as I say, we're going to take you through why you need a cybersecurity incident response plan and how to get started writing one. Now, I think just one thing to say up front, a lot of businesses do spend a lot of money on cybersecurity software, training, all that kind of stuff. But this particular document process is often overlooked, and it's actually one of the most crucial things you could have when responding to an incident. So the background, as I'm sure you know, the risk of cybercrime is continually increasing. Everyone is a target. Cybercriminals do not discriminate these days, so don't think it will not happen to you. It absolutely could, and over time it probably will. Now, I think you've got to accept that there is a risk to your firm, and if at that point you've accepted a risk, so you have to accept that at some point you will suffer from some kind of cyber attack or cyber incident. With that in mind, you need to decide how you're going to react when that happens. So this needs a well-documented plan that everyone in your business can get access to. And so that is what we call the cybersecurity incident response plan. So let's go into a bit more detail about why you might need this plan. So the most important aspect of it is a well-planned response will likely limit the damage from an attack itself. You also need to be able to communicate clearly with your team about what to do when you have a cybersecurity incident. Remember, when you have an incident, people potentially might panic, they might be worried about what's going on, they might not react under pressure how they would do normally. And speed of response is really, really important when you have a cybersecurity incident. The quicker you can respond, the less damage it will cause. So you also need to bear in mind that your insurance company may well require that you have this plan. Now, particularly if you have a cyber insurance policy. And if you've got any security accreditations such as ISO 27001 or IASME governance, then you'll be required to have this plan as well. Additionally, the Information Commissioner's Office, and the Information Commissioner's Office is the government department that looks after GDPR, data protection. They also state you should have a cybersecurity incident response plan. Finally, if you don't have a plan, ultimately, it's going to cost you money in the long term when you have some kind of attack or incident. So we've explained why you need a plan. Let's talk about how you write it. So I'd like to break it down into 4 separate sections, and we're going to start with the scope and initial actions. Scope. Firstly, the first part of your plan is you need to tell people what triggers the plan. So what do you consider to be a cybersecurity incident? I've put a few suggestions down there. It might differ for different businesses, but one thing to bear in mind is that a cybersecurity incident does not necessarily mean there has to be an attack from outside your business. It could be something internal, such as someone getting access to something they shouldn't have done, even printed documents, or could be a disgruntled employee, that kind of thing. So it doesn't necessarily have to be an external attack or a virus. The second thing you want in there is some suggestions for initial actions. So an obvious one is if you do have a virus attack, you're going to want your member of staff to remove that computer from the network. So removing network cable, turning off the wires, that kind of thing. So some basic things to do there if you have got actually an external cyber attack. But obviously the next thing you want them to do is to report the incident internally in your business. Now you might have them report directly to someone who acts on the incident, like the IT department or your outsourced IT. You might want it reported upwards to a member of management who then makes the next decision. Obviously, then they need to wait for instructions. So you've got to be very clear that what you expect from your staff when they're looking at this plan, because they should have a copy of it with them. So the next thing is you need to identify what people need to report. So you should have some kind of collection form that allows people to fill in the information that they need to report, whether it's to your IT provider or to management or whoever they're reporting to. So best practice is to create a form. You might have a copy on your IT systems, or maybe an online copy you can get through a web browser, but you should also have paper copies of this. So this whole plan, people should have a paper copy available to them wherever they're working. So it's by their desk, in their laptop bag, or in their home office, wherever it may be, because potentially they might not have access to electronic copies of it if the worst happens. So for example, if they had a ransomware attack. So I put some examples of information that you might want to collect through this form. There will be a template available on our website for download as well. There'll be some links after this webinar on that. Okay, next step is to document your incident management process. So you've established that there's an incident because it's fallen within scope. The person who's had the issue has followed the initial steps. They've disconnected their computer, reported the information, it's gone up to a director in your business. So that person then needs to decide how to manage the incident that's been reported. So you need to document this process. And there's a few steps that you really need to follow there. So the first one is you've got to coordinate and assess what the incident is. So, what do you need to do with it? Who do you need to communicate to? What's the importance? What's the meaning for the business? And, you need to assemble a team of people potentially who are going to manage this going forwards. So you need to get those people together. The next thing is you need to start communicating. Now, communicating might be to companies who are going to act on the problem, like your IT department or outsourcing provider. But there's lots of other parties you might need to communicate with. So you should have a communication matrix, which is the next thing we're going to cover. This team's also going to need to respond as well. So the people you're communicating out to, they'll come back to you with information, questions. You might have staff coming to you with questions as well. So you're going to need people available to answer those clients potentially too. If word gets out, or if the attack is particularly visible externally, lots of people are going to be asking for information. So you need a team of people who have access to the information to respond to those questions, and who are able to respond to the people asking them. Finally, you're going to need to document everything that goes on, all the information you collect, what you find out, actions you take. This should all be written down, because you might need to refer to it later, potentially for insurance claims, maybe for a police investigation, maybe just for your own due diligence internally. So everything needs to be written down. You need to find a way of recording that. Finally, at the end of the process, you need to close the incident down. So you might want to record lessons learned, for continuous improvement. You might need to make some changes, and you need to make sure that everything is dealt with as well, and you've recorded all of that. So the final step is you've got to put together your contact matrix. So I've put an example there on the screen, but what you're going to need to do is record a few things. Firstly, you're going to need to identify all the companies that all the parties, that you are going to need to communicate with in the event of an incident happening. So this is not just your IT department. It could be lots of other parties as well. So some examples are the police, the Information Commissioner's Office. We've already mentioned them if there's personal data involved. Your insurers, potentially your clients, if it's affecting your clients, investors, your marketing and comms people, legal team. There's a whole raft of people that you might need to speak to. You also need to document on this contact matrix when you need to speak to those particular people. So certain incidents, for instance, if you gave someone access internally to a document they shouldn't have access to, you probably don't need to involve the police. So record that as well. You should obviously record how you contact them, because as I mentioned earlier, time is of the essence when dealing with an incident. So you need that information in the same place. You should write down what information you're going to need to provide them as well, so that when you contact them, you have all the details there. When you need to contact them, so this might be, for instance, the example of the Information Commissioner's Office, you have to contact them within 72 hours of a breach occurring when personal data is involved. But you might want to contact your IT department or IT provider instantly as soon as the incident is reported. And finally, you should document what the sort of response you expect is. So the ICO don't respond immediately, for instance. So you want to make sure that whoever's coordinating this incident is aware of that, so they don't start having wasting time chasing unnecessarily, or if you're expecting an immediate response and you don't get it, then you might want to follow that up. So one thing that's really important to remember when thinking about communicating is that a lot of companies think, actually, we don't really want people to know that we've had a cyber attack. And I can understand that, but actually you have to look at it a different way now. Firstly, lots and lots of businesses have had cyber attacks. It's not unusual now, and it's not an admission that something is wrong with your business. It might be, but admitting you had a cyber attack, if someone really wants to get through your cyber defenses, you can have the best cyber defenses in the world, and it's not going to keep a determined criminal out. So admitting you have a cyber attack is not necessarily a black mark against your business. Secondly, what would be even worse would be if your clients, for example, found out you had a cyber attack and you had not told them. So imagine that someone got into your systems, they got a document on one of your clients, I don't know, a contract or whatever. The next thing your client knows is they get a demand for a ransom. Otherwise, this document's going to be released on the dark web. So you don't really want that happening. You want to stay in control of the incident. So communicating proactively before people hear about this is the best way to look in control. And what you'll find is that actually your clients or investors or whatever party it might be, they're going to have more confidence in you if you communicate to them you have an incident and the steps that you're already taking to be in control of it. So that covers our quick guide to writing an incident response plan. I've got a few resources on here. These slides are going to be sent to you after the webinar, by the way, so no need to write them all down. National Cybersecurity Centre has got a really detailed guide on incident management. They're much more detailed than we've covered today. Obviously, this is a sort of a quick introductory webinar. If you want help with cybersecurity incident response, but other information governance as well, such as writing policies, procedures, disaster recovery plans, I really recommend looking at the IASME information governance standard. They provide you with lots of templates for writing these policies, and there's a checklist that you need to comply with to pass certification. You can also show then to your clients that you've taken this stuff seriously. Finally, we've got a guide as well. ProDrive have effectively a data sheet version of this webinar. We're going to make that available to anyone who's attended this webinar afterwards as well. That concludes the guide today, the briefing. Thank you very much.